Well, it was bound to happen eventually. It wouldn't be Game of Thrones without family members getting a bit too close for comfort, and we're going to be unpacking all the devastating consequences from this week's episode of House of the Dragon today.
So let's get into it, David. Let's start with the big one. I don't want to, but we have to. That little midnight rendezvous between Daemon and Rhaenyra. Now, just to remind you, they are related. He is her uncle. While she should be safely tucked up in bed, Sir Criston Cole stood outside her room, standing guard. Daemon swoops her off to the bowels of the city, where they have a few drinks. They take in a show, all very lovely. And then they head to a brothel. Now, need I remind you, they are related. He is her uncle and she is significantly younger than him. It's just all kinds of bleh. So they have a little snog. It could have gone further, but Daemon pulls back, all part of his manipulation, his game. And word of that gets back to King Viserys, and he is not a happy man, even though there's plenty of incest within the family, but he just doesn't want his daughter touched by Daemon in that way. Understandable.
Exactly, and I think it was always Daemon's plan to get caught. This is a guy who is always in and out of trouble, and he would have expected, of course, for there to be spies at the pleasure house. This wasn't a private space that they went to. It was a very public environment, and it was very foolish otherwise for them to even go there. I think he wanted to be caught because he knew that it would anger his brother, and he knew that it would make him Rhaenyra's only real marriage prospect. And that's kind of the end goal that he's working towards. I think we really see that here. It's pretty icky.
And following on from that, when Rhaenyra returns from the brothel, she's still in a fairly playful mood. I think that's the word for it. And she entices Sir Criston into her chamber and makes it very clear what she wants. He, however, is not so sure initially. And you had some thoughts on that as well, didn't you, David?
Yeah, I did, Abby, because I actually felt quite bad for Sir Criston in this scene. He doesn't come from the extreme wealth that Rhaenyra does, and so having a job in the Targaryen household has been huge for him. And I feel like this proposition was really kind of a lose-lose situation because you could sense there was a lot of reluctance on his part. I think that if he had declined the princess's offer, then he would have been worried that he would just be stripped of his rank and thrown outside. Equally, going through with it, if he ever got caught, it could be off with his head for sleeping with the princess. So really, there was no good outcome for Sir Criston in this scene. And even though Rhaenyra is a younger character, I felt the power was very much in her hands here.
Yeah, it was interesting to see she was the one removing his armor. Usually in those situations in film and TV, it's the male character who's removing the female character's clothing. But here, she was the one being dominant, taking that leading role, which I thought showed a different side to her again as well, which was really interesting.
So this fateful night really has devastating consequences for the entire Targaryen household. The king and queen get wind of what Rhaenyra's been up to with Daemon, and Alicent and Rhaenyra have this really intense conversation where Alicent is very much grilling her on what happened. She wants the facts, and Rhaenyra makes the decision to lie to Alicent and tell her that she is still a virgin, which Alicent is very much making it clear in this scene that if anything else was to be true, she would be absolutely furious.
Now, I actually think that Alicent's judgment in that conversation, and there is a lot of judgment on her part, isn't actually linked to the fact that it's Daemon, although that's deeply, deeply worrying, but the fact that Rhaenyra has had sex outside of marriage. Some might say that Alicent is slut-shaming her friend, which isn't a great look. She certainly went down in my estimations after that.
It is not in Rhaenyra's nature to be deceitful. I cannot say the same for your brother.
Ultimately, Alicent does believe Rhaenyra's story, and she advises her husband, King Viserys, to go easy on his daughter.
Although he does send her a lovely cup of tea to cleanse her of her sins.
Yes, that is rather nasty. And he also makes the decision to fire Otto Hightower as his hand, which I think is going to cause some frosty moments between him and his wife in weeks to come.
The road ahead is uncertain, but the end is clear. Aegon will be king.
And now it's time to pick this week's Head of the House, our standout character from episode 4. David, who did it for you?
Well, this was a difficult one because everyone was acting absolutely appallingly this week. And so I have no choice but to give it to a small background character that I'm affectionately naming the Blackwood Punk. He comes from House Blackwood. He's about 10 or 12 years old, and he's been clearly pressured by his parents into proposing marriage to Rhaenyra. He's there in the hall, putting himself forward and getting laughed at and ridiculed by everyone. It's really quite cruel behavior. But you know what? He ends up proving himself. You know, the middle-aged man who was having a go at him from the sidelines, they get into a duel, and the little kid completely wipes him out. So, you know, good for him, right? Like, he proved that he does mean business. And that's pretty cool. Abby, what should you think?
Well, I'm going to go for one of the OGs. I'm going to go for Rhaenyra. Putting aside her antics with Daemon, let's not get back into that. I actually thought during that conversation with Alicent in the Royal Garden, we saw a different side to her. She was essentially gaslighting her mate. She was being pretty manipulative, drawing on their years-old friendship. And I just thought that was quite cunning and clever of her, which are key skills that she is going to need when she sits on the throne.
From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire.
Well, that brings to a close this episode of Beyond the Dragon. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to catch up with House of the Dragon, you can watch it Mondays on Sky Atlantic, first at 2 a.m, then again at 9. And you can also watch whenever you like on the streaming service now. We'll be back next week with all the details on House of the Dragon episode 5. We hope to see you then. In the meantime, stay safe.
Bye.